Hello. Hi. Welcome to today's live. My name is Dr. Ellie Rayner. I'm an obstetrics and gynecology specialist doctor, and this is We Are Fit&Well, and a live today on pregnancy and anxiety and how to reduce any anxiety you're feeling, particularly at the minute, given the current pandemic. So hello everyone, lots of people joining. So while we wait for some people to join, if you are pregnant, tell me how many weeks pregnant you are, tell me where you are, tell me if it's your first baby, how you're getting on, anything like that, while we wait for a few people. I've got my cup of tea with me. This is going to be a nice informal chat today. So this is meant to be about creating positive pregnancy messages for you if you are pregnant at the minute. Lovely. Hello everyone. So I'll get started. So as I said, my name's Dr. Ellie Rayner. I'm an obstetrician and gynecologist working for the NHS down in Devon. I'm also an antenatal and hypnobirthing teacher, and I'm the founder of the Maternity Collective. This is We Are Fit&Well, and today we are doing an Instagram live on anxiety in pregnancy and how to reduce any anxiety that you're feeling at the moment. So I'm going to go through a little bit of an overview of anxiety in pregnancy, talk a little bit about the symptoms, and I've got 10 ways that you might be able to help reduce any anxiety that you're feeling at the minute. This will be stored on the We Are Fit&Well Instagram page on their IGTV, so you can rewatch it as many times as you need, go back or share it to a friend or a family member that also might find this helpful. So you can ask any questions you want to, just put them at the bottom and I'll try and answer them as we go. If you do have any other questions at a later date, you can pop them in the comments and I'll try and get to them when I can. If not, you can send me a direct message. So I'm the Instagram handle at Maternity Medic. So that's my normal Instagram page where I do post lots of different things related to pregnancy, anxiety, antenatal education and the information that you might find helpful. So if you are pregnant, congratulations on your pregnancy. I hope you're doing well at the moment. I completely appreciate this may not be what you're expecting of your pregnancy, and it may be different if you've had a pregnancy before to how it was last time, and I completely understand. I've worked full-time for the NHS throughout the whole pandemic, so I do know what you're going through. I've looked after many women and families during this time, and I know how challenging it has been and how well everyone's doing and well you're doing at the moment if you are pregnant. So if you are watching, do tell me where you're watching from. Do tell me a little bit about yourself if you're pregnant, how many weeks you are, and if it's your first baby or not. Just it's nice to know who I'm talking to. We're going to talk a little bit about anxiety in pregnancy. Now, we're going to do that in the context of what's going on at the moment, and it's really important to know that if you are feeling anxious, then that could be a really normal response, and it's a really common and normal response to any stressful situation. So it doesn't necessarily mean anything's wrong. It doesn't necessarily mean that you are particularly anxious any more than somebody else. It might be that you are, but that's fine. We can talk about that. But actually feeling anxious with what's going on at the moment would be a completely normal response to have. All of us will have had different changes in our emotions with what's going on. And particularly during pregnancy, that could also have an impact on you more than somebody else, because if you are pregnant, you may also have added new anxieties that you hadn't had previously, thinking about your baby, thinking about how it's going to be to become a mum or to enter parenthood if you're a birth partner, or just thinking about other difficult situations you might be worried about, things like finances, childcare, anything at all. So it's not uncommon for women during their pregnancy to become anxious about certain things, anxious about the birth, for example. And with what's going on at the minute, lots of that anxiety has also shifted towards anxiety over the pandemic. Now, it's really important to know it does look like we're coming out of the COVID-19 situation. If you are pregnant at the minute, I want you to be really reassured that we have done lots of research over the last year. We've got lots of information that we didn't have this time last year about pregnancy and COVID-19, and there is lots of good information online in resources such as the Royal College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists website, talking about the medical side and the impact it might have on you and your baby, which we think is actually really minimal. So that's really important if you're worried particularly about the medical side of the virus, then that's fine. But we're going to talk today more about the emotional effect. So anxiety, like I said, is a really normal response to a situation. Symptoms that we'd expect maybe someone to describe if they're feeling anxious might include being more irritable, feeling more worried, feeling fearful, focusing on these things, feeling like they're on edge, feeling quite stressed and anxious about a particular thing in particular, or just feeling generally like something's really bothering them. You might feel worried about yourself, about your unborn baby, and you might also feel like you're having problems sleeping, difficulty getting off to sleep, and that thoughts are worrying you and wandering around your head. Now, it's normal, like I said, to have a certain degree of those symptoms, and that could just be part of normal pregnancy and what the general population is feeling at the moment. If those symptoms are troubling you more frequently, and you're finding that it's becoming a more frequent concern of yours, or that someone around you says that they're worried about how anxious you're feeling, then it may be important to talk to your birth partner in particular, any other loved ones that you can trust, and particularly your healthcare professional, so your midwife or your doctor, just to have a discussion about whether these are the normal spectrum of feelings we'd expect anyone to have during their pregnancy, or if it's a sign of something more serious underlying, something that may require some treatment. Now, when I say treatment, that doesn't always mean a medical treatment like a tablet or a drug, particularly in the case of anxiety and during pregnancy. Medication is very often not the first thing we think about. Often talking therapies, reassurance, speaking to counsellors and psychologists can be really helpful before we think about things like medical treatment. So if you are worried about being anxious, don't feel scared, don't feel like you can't tell anyone. Your midwife and your obstetrician will be checking with you at every appointment to ask you about your feelings, and it's absolutely the right thing to tell them if you're feeling particularly worried about something, and if you're feeling like you might need extra support in a certain way. So thinking about that, and if you are noticing that you've got any of those symptoms, it's important to think, is there anything I can do about them? And there absolutely is. There's some really, what I would call simple or conservative techniques that don't require any medication, don't require too much effort or energy, just a few simple steps that you can take to help promote a calmer feeling during your pregnancy and as you approach birth. And actually lots of them can be really helpful during labour and birth. So I've got 10 different things I was going to talk to you about today. These are ideal if you can work on all 10. Some of them might not be for you, but these are just to give you some ideas of some of the things that, as an obstetrician, so that's a doctor who specialises in pregnancy, labour and birth, things that I would recommend that I know would help improve your physical and emotional well-being. So firstly, like we've said, talking to someone. It's actually really important to share your emotions with someone close to you, but also with your healthcare professionals. Now, if we know about these things, we can actually often manage them before they become too problematic. And that's the same for your family. It's been a very difficult time for many, many families, and I think we forget that in normal situations, lots of families would be quite close to their loved one when they were pregnant. They will share their journey with them, and that might be more challenging at the moment. So keeping in touch with the people that love you the most and that you love the most will really help you feel connected to them, and it will help you normalise speaking about any emotions that you're feeling that might be worrying you, any anxieties you have, and they might be able to offer you the reassurance that they're here, that they're able to support you, that they want to support you, and that they really are, that they care about you. And that can be difficult at the moment with the way we have limited communications and seeing people face to face, but it's so important to use those other ways that we can communicate, from technologies, Zoom calling, meeting up outside where we can, and just keeping in touch with anyone that you think would provide you with that support. Now, in doing that, you might also find that they're able to help offload. You might find that just talking to someone offloads some of that emotional burden that maybe you feel totally responsible for. Maybe you feel that you have the sole responsibility for keeping yourself and your baby safe, and actually you might find in many situations that your family really want to support you and want to look after you. And we know that by talking to your healthcare professionals, so myself as a doctor, I would want to know if you're feeling any of these things so I can offer you support where needed and answer any questions that you have that actually you might be worried about but actually aren't either relevant to you or your pregnancy or to your baby. The second thing I want to talk about is exercise. Now, we know that exercise and getting outside into nature and getting either a walk or run can be really beneficial for your mental well-being as well as your physical well-being. So we know during pregnancy that if you exercise before pregnancy and during pregnancy and you maintain your level of exercise, if you were exercising beforehand, can actually reduce your risk of complications and can actually ensure that your birth, there's scientific evidence that your birth may be less painful, so there's less use of epidurals, and also you might have a shorter labour. Now, exercise also releases endorphins, and endorphins can help you feel like you've got lower levels of anxiety and stress. And all of these things that I'm going to talk about are about reducing the anxiety and stress hormones that you have to help you feel calmer during your pregnancy and as you approach birth. So exercise in itself, getting out into nature, helps lowers our blood pressure, lowers our heart rate, and actually can reduce the chance of what's called preterm labour. So your baby coming early, but also your baby having a low birth weight. And I don't think many people know that. So if you can, try and make time to exercise, particularly outdoors. So get out into the fresh air, take deep breaths as you're walking, and just really allow your body to reduce its levels of stress hormones. And that will be really beneficial for you and really might help with any anxiety that you're having. The third thing to mention is it's really important to look at your diet and about eating well. Now, it's really easy, and it's really easy at the moment to get into bad habits, particularly when we can't have the same access to food and food outlets and shopping that we might have normally. But actually keeping a healthy diet during your pregnancy and reducing your caffeine intake has also been shown to help treat higher levels of anxiety or stress in pregnancy. So we know that caffeine and having caffeinated drinks raises our heart rate, can raise our stress hormones. So think about that. It's also important for your pregnancy that you don't consume too much caffeine. And there's lots of good information online about what's a safe level of caffeine intake to have. But that is something I would look at if you're feeling more anxious and stressed. Just acknowledge and recognise, am I eating well? Am I supporting my body during this time? And is there anything else in that respect that I could think about doing? Is there any other changes that I could make? Now, sleep. Sleep is a really important part of our general well-being. If we're tired, if we're exhausted, we might be in a heightened state of anxiety. Our body's at a heightened stress state. We're frazzled, we're worn out, and that's never going to help create a calmer sense within your body, so a calmer and more controlled sense of feeling. So what we would recommend is trying to develop a healthy sleep routine, particularly in your pregnancy, because you may find that you are more exhausted than you are before you were pregnant. So spending a little bit of time working out what works for you as a bedtime routine can be really, really important. So I'm going to talk about it a little bit later when we go a little bit more deeply into relaxation and hypnobirthing. But by working on a bedtime routine that promotes you to decrease your stress hormones, decrease your adrenaline, and puts you in the calmer state of your kind of body's hormonal systems, you will find that you sleep better, that you fall asleep quicker, and that you feel more rested afterwards. And this alone can help reduce your levels of anxiety. And particularly during your pregnancy, we know that getting enough sleep and rest is helpful for you and your baby as well. Self-care is the fifth thing I'd like to just mention. So we know that having good self-care and taking time yourself to look after yourself. So whether that be finding something that you enjoy, starting a new hobby. It is difficult at the moment, and I'm not going to pretend that it's not, when so many of the activities that we normally take a great deal of pleasure and enjoyment out of are not possible. And for many of us, self-care involves socialising and being with our friends and our family, and that is more difficult at the moment. But if there's anything that you can find that you feel is something that really represents you taking time out for you, that isn't to do with anything else, that isn't for somebody else, and that could be something very, very small, just as much as reading a book, doing a puzzle, having a shower that is particularly, just, it's not a shower to get clean, wash your hair and do all the practical aspects of self-care, but actually just, if something, if water relaxes you, just being able to be in that moment, having a bath, something like that, which you can label to yourself as, this is purely for my own emotional well-being. It's not a practical task that I need to do as part of my day. It can be really hard, and I know that, and I'm not naive to that, when we're busy, when we're working, when we've got difficult lives and schedules to fit around. But if you are finding that you are having these higher levels of anxiety, higher levels of stress, and feeling overwhelmed, feeling irritable, feeling worried about yourself or your baby, finding time to make time for yourself and just to slow down and say, this is what I'm going to do today to give myself a moment as a treat. And it shouldn't really be a treat, but we know as busy young people, it often becomes the last thing that we think of. It often becomes the thing when we're busy and tired, is the first thing to go off the list, because we know we have to achieve all the other practical things in our day. So try and find some self-care. There's lots of things you can look at online if you're not sure what would be right for you. Lots of things, so having baths, using lavender oils, things like that is completely safe for pregnancy. So if you are pregnant and some of the things that you would normally do, you can't do at the moment, or in light of the pandemic, just take a moment, discuss with your birth partner whether it's being with them. That might be enough. I'm just going to have a little sip of my drink if that's okay. Number 6, so this is where we start getting a little bit more specific. So lots of the things I've talked about could be related to anybody who's feeling anxious, not necessarily pregnancy specific, but this is where I'd like to really focus on the importance of managing your anxiety, particularly during your pregnancy. And this is where my experience as an obstetrician and as an antenatal teacher and a hypnobirthing teacher comes in, and this is what I'd like to really focus on as more of the majority of what I'm going to talk about today. So one of the most important pieces of advice that I can give you, so it's number 6 on my list, is about the importance of not Googling when you're pregnant. Now, you'll have lots of different changes going on, from a physical to emotional side of yourself and your pregnancy, and concerns over your baby. You'll have questions that will pop into your head, and if it's not around the time of a midwife or a doctor appointment, it's completely natural to say, actually, I'm going to Google and look up the answer. And that's completely fine. The internet is a fantastic resource of lots of different information. But the most important thing to do is to not use any resources that are not reliable, evidence-based resources. And the importance of this is, if you are anxious about a particular topic and then you actually receive either the incorrect information or you receive something that's quite heavily opinionated towards a certain idea on that topic, that can be much worse for you, because that may subconsciously raise your anxiety further. So when you're Googling, I would suggest using resources such as the Tommy's website, such as any of the NHS choices or NHS information websites, the Royal College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists, so the RCOG, have fantastic resources. They've got a patient information section, and they've got great leaflets on lots of different pregnancy and birth related topics that you may want to know more about. But also your local hospital will have policies and guidelines and patient information resources that are specific to your area and the hospital that you're booked with, that your pregnancy care is provided by. Now, if you Google something, unfortunately there's a lot of forums and there's a lot of different opinions and conflicting information. And if you're worried about something already and you read something that says, and it can come across really, really confidently, and you aren't to know, and it's called your unknown unknowns, and it's something as a doctor that I spend my life talking about. So just have more tea. And it's your unknown unknowns. So it's the things you don't know that you don't know. And we have it in all aspects of life. There's so many things that I don't know about. And that could be whether it's to do with fixing a car or DIY around the house. But if you don't know about it, and you also don't know that you don't know, how are you meant to know until someone tells you? So when you Google something and you see something listed or written about very confidently, you might think, oh right, that's the correct answer, but because you've got no way of knowing whether it is correct or not. So particularly when you're pregnant, lots of people will give you their opinion, they will give you offers of advice, but it's important to know that you and your baby are completely unique. Your pregnancy is your pregnancy and it's nobody else's. Your situation, your personal circumstances, your background, your medical history, everything is unique to you. So it's really important to use resources that are completely balanced. So resources that don't favour one particular response over another or one answer over another, that will provide you the real information, so the truth, without prejudice or without bias. So I think Google is fantastic, but I strongly say if you are pregnant at the moment, please try and avoid any kind of forums that may put you at risk of hearing and being exposed to information that may cause you more uncertainty. So you may think, actually, I thought I knew the answer and now I've been given this information that's confused me again. It might be information that conflicts your healthcare professional, and then that might cause you to lose faith in the medical provider that you've got. So if you have read something that's different to what your midwife or your obstetrician says, please ask us. So if it doesn't quite fit with what you've read, we will always be happy to clarify and to explain why we've said what we've said, why we've made the recommendation that we have, and why the information you may have seen or heard is correct or incorrect, because we can absolutely be wrong. So you may have found some more up-to-date research, and if that's the case, that's fantastic. And if you were my patient, I'd be happy to say, oh, fantastic, do you mind if I take some time to read this, have a look at it, and I'll get back to you when I've had a look at it. That's fine. But if you do worry that what you've seen or read is different to what you've heard by your doctor, it may be that it's not related to your pregnancy or your situation. So just check that. And that's my number 6. Avoid Googling where you can, because it may cause you to raise up your levels of anxiety and stress further. And that's what we're trying to avoid. So number 7 from me is about the importance of avoiding negative birth stories and negative pregnancy stories. And you'll hear this quite a lot. And it's a shame that it happens so much, but it's a really important part of promoting a positive, empowering pregnancy for yourself. We all know friends and family members who've had a difficult birth, a difficult labour, a difficult pregnancy, where things haven't quite gone to plan, where things weren't as expected. We've all watched TV programmes and movies where birth is portrayed as very dramatic and very exciting with suspense, and it's really important to know that that's not reality. Even the reality TV shows are far from the truth, and the majority of midwives and obstetricians who watch those strongly scoff at the TV. I sit there and I just, knot my head in my hands and feel mortified that that's the impression that's given by the media about pregnancy and birth. Now, if you are pregnant, it's really important to fill your mind, your body, your surroundings with positive pregnancy and birth messages. And why that's important is I'll talk about the hormones involved in labour and birth in a minute. But actually, if you fill your mind with negativity and negative stories and fear around labour and birth, you can actually affect your ability to birth effectively. So it actually has a physical impact on your body. So as well as you saying emotionally, it's not very nice to hear about someone who sadly did have an emergency cesarean, that is absolutely the truth. And I'm not saying don't be supportive of your friends, but it's important to say to them that you're sorry to hear about that experience, but you'd like to hear about it when you're not pregnant. Or can we talk about it after my baby's birth? And that may not be received very well all the time, but it's important for your mental well-being and that of your birth partner to do that, to keep your mind protected from the stress and the drama surrounding birth. And it's something that we will see every single day. So please don't watch One Born Every Minute or some of the other quite dramatic TV birth programs or movies where people waters go in the supermarket and suddenly it's a blue light ambulance to the hospital, because that's not the reality. And it's important to feel calm and in control of your own emotions around your labour and birth. So it's really important to feel positive and empowered and almost excited as you approach birth. Now you're going to say, gosh, how, when I'm feeling anxious, this talks about pregnancy and anxiety, how on earth can she expect me to feel excited about my birth? That's what I'm most fearful of. And that is completely true. And that is what we're here to talk about, is why it's so important to do what you can during your pregnancy to reduce those levels of stress and anxiety. So fill your mind with positive birth stories. So if you Google positive birth stories, there's a lot of good information out there. There's quite a lot of videos of what we call physiological birth, so unassisted birth. There's also some beautiful assisted birth videos, so birth assisted with forceps or ventouse, that doesn't need to be scary, that doesn't need to be worrying. There's also lots of videos available for abdominal birth, so for a caesarean birth, again, are really supportive of a calm, nurturing environment. So there is lots of ways to consider your birth and your baby's birth as a positive experience. If you have been told if you surrounded yourself during your pregnancy with these negative birth stories and fears, and unfortunately, and it's never meant with malice. None of your friends will be telling you because they truly want you to feel scared. They'll be telling you because they want you to be prepared. But unfortunately, there's a fine line between feeling prepared by being aware of some of the potential complications that can happen and being informed about your choices should that be the case, and being scared and feeling like, gosh, that's going to happen to me, or what if that happens to me, and being scared of that happening. And that's what we do in antenatal classes, and when you meet your midwife, it's a fine balance. They will mention some of these things to you about the chance of maybe having a caesarean section in labour, because everything is about preparing you and informing you, but without scaring you. But unfortunately, that may not be the case if it's the reality of one of your friends or a close family member, and their reality is so true, and it's so important to acknowledge that and to listen to them, but just keep that maybe for when you're not pregnant, and have that ability to have a discussion openly and honestly outside of pregnancy, outside of your own pregnancy. So that's about avoiding negative birth stories and avoiding negativity during your pregnancy around things that may then increase your anxiety further. That also fits with things like watching the news at the moment with the coronavirus pandemic, and small amounts is absolutely fine, but you may become overwhelmed if you feel like you're watching all of the updates, all of the information, and it may feel like it's overwhelming because things are changing regularly. And again, it's just about imagining and kind of protecting yourself. So imagine a little bubble for yourself and your pregnancy, just to keep yourself in a state of mind that promotes positive, mindful well-being, and thoughts that are going to be positive and empowering as you approach your birth. Just have some more tea. So my number 8 is about hypnobirthing. So lots of you may have heard of hypnobirthing, some of you may have done a course, some of you may have been recommended it by a friend or a family member, some of you may not have heard about it at all. But the principle behind hypnobirthing is about using a few different things that collectively prepare you for labour and birth, and help to balance your hormones in a way that promotes a calm and positive feeling during your pregnancy and during your labour, that then can actually help try and make your labour easier and less painful. So it consists of kind of 4 main components, and lots of the things are kind of the things that I've mentioned. So one of them is using positive pregnancy affirmations, and the principle behind that is, again, filling your mind and your subconscious with positive feelings towards pregnancy and birth. And there's been really good evidence that affirmations can change your mindset. So having affirmations such as, pregnancy is empowering for me, and having that mantra, so having affirmations around your house, having affirmations in your handbag, in your drawer, when you open the cutlery drawer, when you go to sit down at the dinner table, by having these constant reminders throughout the day of positive pregnancy and birth thoughts, can actually help change your mindset and can help reduce your levels of anxiety and reduce your levels of stress. So you can buy lots of different pregnancy affirmation cards, and they can be a really good way of constantly throughout the day, throughout your pregnancy, just feeding you positive thoughts. And this is something that I would strongly recommend looking into, because they are really helpful, and they can be something that you can focus on to ground you, to take a moment of your day just to remember to connect with your baby and to be reassured in your birthing, that your birth can be positive and prepared for labour. So there are lots of different affirmation cards that you can buy, and that's one component of hypnobirthing, is using positive affirmations regularly. Things like popping them on the back of the toilet door, for example. So you go to the toilet and you just, in that split second, suddenly you've seen something that's triggered you to remember just to have a positive trigger. And if you start that maybe around 20-25 weeks of pregnancy, by the time you get to your due date, these have become true mantras that your body is used to, and that your mind is used to, and that you may have developed this real sense of underlying subconscious positivity growing as you approach your baby's birth. So another component of hypnobirthing is guided relaxations. And again, this is about your body feeling relaxed, and about you creating triggers and anchors that help you go into a more calm and relaxed state. So guided relaxations are scripts. They're anything from a page to a couple of pages long. You can have them on audio tapes, you can have them as MP3s, you can have them downloaded on your phone. What's really helpful is your birth partner can read them to you, and that can be really soothing and positive. And they're about they're often stories that are that promote a calm, relaxed state. Maybe there's one that takes you off on a magic carpet to somewhere, and takes you on a journey and asks you to think of a place that you really enjoy. And it just allows you to lie down, to close your eyes, just to listen to the words. Some people find that they don't even end up listening to the words. They drift off, they float away, and that's a really positive thing. And what it does is it just, again, lowers those stress hormones, raises your levels of oxytocin, so the pregnancy and labour hormone, and just sets your body into a calmer state. So these relaxations I've mentioned earlier about a kind of a sleep routine, and it's actually really helpful and beneficial if you can to try and do these at night before you go to bed as kind of a wind down. And they're one of the components of hypnobirthing, because then by having that in a relaxed place, in your safe environment such as your bedroom, having these regular triggers, you may find then when you hear that story, just like a powerful smell that triggers you to remember like a positive thing. So a smell, when you're walking along, you have a smell that reminds you of a holiday, for example, you're like, and it's that feeling. So these can be the same for these relaxations, and they can just be an opportunity for you to take time out during the day. And there's pregnancy specific ones that enable you to help connect with your baby, and they're really helpful if you have got this increased level of tension, stress and anxiety, and an opportunity to just take some time before bed as part of that sleep routine to wind down. And then people find they use them in the early part of their labour, and that also helps when they're having the initial kind of early contractions. Some people call them surges in hypnobirthing, that are part of the first stage of labour, and they find that they can be helpful for that. And again, it can help take you back to being 30 weeks pregnant with your birth partner on a normal Wednesday evening going to bed. So it can really help take you back to maybe a calm or relaxed state of mind. The other component of hypnobirthing is breathing techniques, so I'll talk about that at the end, but just undertaking some calming breaths, and hypnobirthing teaches you that, and that can be really helpful. And the other important reason why many women find hypnobirthing helpful is because it encourages you to develop these self-hypnosis techniques. So when you combine all of these different things with learning some breathing techniques, undertaking some guided relaxations, using the positive pregnancy affirmations, you can find that by the time you come towards the end of your pregnancy, you've developed a really strong way of calming yourself down. And it's not something that you may have done or learnt outside of pregnancy. And this is something that you can do if you're not pregnant. And I do it myself. I'm not pregnant, but even before coming to this video today, I've got a particular essential oil that we have in a diffuser in my home, and I put that on, and that just helped me think, right, I need to just calm my stress levels down. I'm anxious, I'm going to do a live talk, so I spend a few moments just before I actually click go live to calm my breath, to take some deep breathing and undertake some deep breathing and just slow my heart rate down. So this doesn't matter if you're pregnant or not pregnant, but if you are pregnant, these are particularly helpful because we know that many women have this kind of tension and fear building up towards birth. So there's a focus that you can use. You can use these triggers to help throughout the pregnancy develop this skill in preparation for birth. Hypnobirthing is a very silly name. It comes from the idea of hypnosis for birth and the idea of using your mind and the power of your mind to prepare you for labour and birth. And it's actually really interesting. So it was first hypothesised, and the principle was first hypothesised by an obstetrician called Grantley Dick Reed back in the 1920s, 1930s. He was an obstetrician working in London, and he was the first person to recognise how the power of the mind can affect your physical state. So how if you have a positive mindset, if you're not fearful, if you've got high levels of stress hormones, they can actually be negatively impacted, whereas if you can control them, you can potentially have physical changes that can help you. And he recognised this during birth and recognised the power that this mindset could have during a labour and during childbirth. So this is where this has come from. It's evolved over time with different hypnotherapists who also study the mind, working out different ways you can do this more effectively based on his original principles. And that's why we get these components now that ideally should be practiced throughout the pregnancy. So lots of people do a hypnobirthing course and they think, right, I've done it, hypnobirthing tick, when actually the most effective way to develop, to have the biggest benefit from these really does require commitment over time. And if you are feeling anxious, and that's what this talk is about, pregnancy and anxiety, this is something I would really strongly suggest you look at, because you may find that some of these tools and techniques are helpful for you. So just taking time to positively affirm with your mind the feelings that you're having, to recognise them, to acknowledge them, and to turn them into a positive mindset during your pregnancy, using some relaxation techniques, using some of the other anchors, so smells or different colours, which we talk about in hypnobirthing, to help your body create triggers to be at, I need to go into a more relaxed state, just to help you nudge yourself into that calm state. And the reason why I said I'd explain, so the reason why hypnobirthing is important and the reason why it helps and these are important is because they do have this physical impact on your body. So it's not just emotional, it can actually have physical impact on your hormones, but then has this overwhelming changes that can actually make a labour and a birth potentially easier. So there's two hormonal systems that we have, so two nervous systems that we have in our body, the sympathetic and the parasympathetic. Now our adrenaline and our stress response, our fight and flight response is all part of one nervous system called the sympathetic nervous system. And our rest and digest, our relaxation, our oxytocin secretion is all part of the other nervous system, the parasympathetic nervous system. And what happens is if we're constantly in a stressed state with high levels of anxiety and our heart rate is up, what's happening is we're getting prepared to fight or flight, or we're fearful of something. So our adrenaline goes up and we find that we're stressed, anxious, and we're ready to fight. Now that's all very well if we're being fought with a truly fearful, scary situation. But the majority of the time, particularly in pregnancy and in birth, that's not the case. what's happened is we are fearful because our mind is telling us we're fearful of birth. Maybe we're scared about something that we've seen or read, and we're worried about the birthing process. But what happens is if we're in that stressed state, that fight or flight response, unfortunately the other nervous system that secretes oxytocin is suppressed. They can't work together. So when we're working in one system, the other system is suppressed. And unfortunately, adrenaline and the hormone adrenaline navigates the blood flow away from the uterus. It takes the blood flow away from the uterus to our muscles, our arms, our legs, to our vision, our hearing, to make us, because we're thinking we're going to have to fight, so we need to be ready to run, we need to be ready to fight. So that stimulates that sympathetic nervous system. Now, unfortunately, if it does that, what actually happens is the blood flow is drawn away from the uterus. And if the blood flow is drawn away from the uterus, the muscles of the womb don't get enough oxygen or nutrition. And what that can mean is the labour could be slower and more painful. And that's the principle behind it. So what we need to do is suppress the anxiety, the stress hormones that we have, and increase the oxytocin hormone. So increase the calm, rest, relax, rest and digest, it's called, system. So that's why during your pregnancy, trying to develop techniques and trying to develop ways that you can increase your oxytocin and learn how to bring yourself down out of this heightened stress state, bring your levels of adrenaline down, will actually promote a calmer, more comfortable, relaxed birth, because your blood supply, you'll say, right, I just need to calm myself down, and hopefully in doing that, what you're doing is you're stimulating more oxytocin release, you're diverting the blood flow to the uterus, and that can help labour establish, can help labour progress. And just like any muscles, if any muscle isn't getting enough nutrition, enough oxygen, enough water, it can be more painful. So that's the principle behind hypnobirthing, giving you techniques, giving you tools, giving you a toolkit during your pregnancy, so you're not in a state of being scared and anxious. And it's called the fear, tension, pain cycle. So fear, tension and pain in a circular motion. And the idea is if you're fearful about pregnancy and labour and childbirth, this causes tension because your muscles in the womb will, the nutrition and the blood will be diverted away from that to the arms, the legs, because you're fearful. So you're thinking you need to fight, you need to run away, you need to be in preparation for something, for a stressful event. So everything becomes quite tense. And because of that tenseness, that means that the muscle and the oxygen and the blood flow has been drawn away from the uterus, causes pain because the blood is being diverted to by your stress response, and that can cycle back round to causing more fear, because then you're more fearful again about what's going to happen. So that's why I'm suggesting some of these techniques to develop during the pregnancy and to help relax you in preparation for birth, because it can actually help during labour. So I'll have a sip of this. The other thing to mention is number 9. So that's kind of a very brief overview of hypnobirthing. That is a very brief overview, but that's why many people find it helpful, understanding that principle of how to balance your hormones, why it's important, and why there's some science behind that. It's a very quick overview. We go into a lot more detail of the hormones, and how you can control which of those two, sympathetic or parasympathetic nervous systems, you're trying to shift your body, because unfortunately you can't just tell your body to divert blood to your uterus during your labour. So you need to develop ways to try and convince your body to be in one or the other nervous systems. So the other thing that I've found from my experience that is really helpful in reducing anxiety and stress during pregnancy and during labour is antenatal education and classes. Many people find that they're quite fearful, and their anxiety comes from the fear of the unknown, and that's completely normal if it's your first pregnancy, if it's your first baby. How are you meant to know about all these different things? You're going to only hear that from things you've read, friends you've talked to. So lots of people find that feeling informed and empowered and feeling knowledgeable actually reduces their level of anxiety, because sometimes fear of something is worse than when you know about it and then you really understand it. sometimes, for the majority of the case, finds actually it's not as scary and worrying. You can be prepared, you can then have an idea of what to expect, so it's not the complete unknown, and you can also know about what informed choices you're going to make. So should you be faced with a situation where maybe a doctor says I would recommend a cesarean section, because you already know why they might make that recommendation, because you understand what that involves and you've had a think about it and you've discussed it antenatally with your birth partner, you'll be more prepared and it's less likely to be something that worries you. So it's something that I would strongly suggest. Undertaking antenatal classes and being prepared for a labour and birth and getting as much information as you can from reliable sources is really important, and something that I would say does make a big difference to your level of anxiety that you may be feeling, because it's those unknown unknowns, or the known things that you know but you don't understand. And then the final thing, so number 10, is breathing techniques. So calming breath, or any kind of breathing that has a lot of focus, that's with a longer exhale than inhale, has been shown to reduce the levels of stress hormones, reduce the level of adrenaline. It slows your heart rate and it lowers your blood pressure and it puts you in that calm state. So just like I said before I started this live, I use breathing techniques all of the time. So for example, taking a slow breath in for 4 counts, and then an even slower long breath out for 8 counts. It doesn't need to be counted, that's just what I use, 4 and 8. Anything that ensures that your exhale breath, so your breath out, is longer than your inhale, will have the same effect. So it's important to try and do this regularly. You can do this if you're in a particularly acute situation. So if you're particularly worried, so before I came on to have a chat, it's, coming on to do a live, so I thought, right, just sit for a minute and do some calming breaths just to slow my heart rate, to lower my blood pressure, to reduce my adrenaline, and to try and enable myself to just breathe for a minute and just relax. So you can do that if you've got a particular thing you're worried about. Maybe that's going to an appointment by yourself. Maybe that's being told whether to, for this appointment, whether I'm going to need to be induced or not. Whether that's when the doctor just said that you need to have a cesarean. Whatever it is, you can use it particularly for a particular situation, or what I would more strongly recommend is just using it generally day to day. So trying to find time throughout your pregnancy to undertake some deep breathing. So the best way to practice is to kind of make it part of a routine, and by having that longer breath out, you will feel it will slow down, and you'll feel afterwards just a sense of now. I'd recommend doing it at least 4 counts. So if you do in for 4 and then out for 8, and you do that 4 times over, that's about 45 seconds to a minute. And that's part of, I mentioned during hypnobirthing, that's actually part of what would be one whole, usually the length of a contraction or a surge. So that might be helpful for you if to breathe your way through that contraction or surge. So by practicing that kind of length of time and counting during your pregnancy can be really helpful in preparation for birth. Some people find that focusing on a number is really difficult, and that's completely fine. You don't have to do that. You can do whatever's right for you, but as long as the exhale breath is longer than your inhale breath, you will see the benefit. So if you can try and find the time for 2 minutes, or even better 5 minutes every single day, and this is not specific to pregnancy, so you can do this with your partner, you can do this on your own, but it's something that has been shown to really help you to relax and calm, and might make a difference to those stress and anxiety levels. So that is the 10 things that I think can be really helpful if you are pregnant and to help reduce your anxiety. So talking to someone, undertaking regular exercise and activity, eating well and keeping your caffeine intake down, undertaking a good sleep routine and having a good sleep pattern and having enough sleep, trying to find some kind of self-care for yourself, not Googling and not using forums or any information online that's not evidence-based and accurate, making sure it's always from a trusted resource or a trusted healthcare professional, avoiding negative stories, so avoiding anything that's going to put you even further at worry about yourself, your baby or your pregnancy. I would recommend looking at hypnobirthing or some of the principles, even if it's not doing a hypnobirthing course, but just looking at some of the principles about the power of the mind and about how using some of these mindfulness techniques, even just small ones like affirmations or relaxations, just to help develop an ability to practice being able to calm your own body, calm yourself ready for potentially labour and birth, or calm yourself in a stressful situation. Making sure that you are informed about your options, informed about your choices, and knowing what would be important for you, so you're undertaking antenatal education, and then practicing some breathing techniques or using breathing techniques, particularly if you're finding one particular thing stressful. So as you're entering your ultrasound scan, or as you're going for that appointment, or while you're during labour, during any of those contractions or surges. So that's all from me. One of the most important take-home messages from today is to get the support that you need. So if for whatever reason you feel that you do have significant levels of anxiety and stress at the moment, and you're worried about yourself, you're worried about a loved one, or you think you need extra support, then please talk to someone you trust. Speak to your midwife, speak to your doctor, because there is lots of things that we can do. We are here to support you, whatever. There's nothing that will ever surprise us or shock us. We just want to be here to look after you, to help you, and to help you have the best possible positive pregnancy and birth that you can. So please talk to someone if you're worried about anything. There's lots of good resources and support networks online, so things like the Tommy's Charity and Pandas are really helpful. So if you need more formal support, you could look at those charities. And I really hope you found this video helpful. Like I said, my name is Dr. Ellie Rayner. I'm an obstetrician and gynaecologist. I'm an antenatal and hypnobirthing teacher, and I'm the founder of the Maternity Collective. And this has been a live for We Are Fit&Well, and it's been talking mostly around anxiety and pregnancy and my 10 top ways that you can reduce anxiety and stress, and why that can be beneficial for you and your baby during pregnancy and as you approach birth. So if you have liked the video, please give it a like, a share to your friends, or pop me a comment below. I hope it's helpful. If you want any more information, I'm at Maternity Medic, so I'll be tagged in the video, so you can go across my page. I've got lots of information about pregnancy, labour and birth, and advice if you are an expectant parent, or on other women's health issues. So thank you so much for joining me. I don't think there's any questions for now, so if that's it, pop them in the comments if you do have a question, and I'll try and answer them over the next few days. So thank you everyone, and if you are pregnant, stay safe, stay well, and all the best for the rest of your pregnancy.